for today's presentation will include the following. It will include a background of the General Electric Company, both domestic and international, formulation of a business case based on the UN Global Compact and sustainability principles, a practical case study of Ethiopia and the presence of GE, critical psychology and the Global Compact principles for a business and action plan, as well as the Global Compact self-assessment tool to evaluate the company and human rights, an implementation and institutionalization of the Global Compact, and then finally, the strengths and limitations of critical psychology framework with human rights recommendations. To begin, the background for General Electric. General Electric is a company that has largely shifted away from consumer electric products and appliances and moved more towards healthcare and energy technologies. And as of 2022, the three main focuses have been energy, aviation, and healthcare. General Electric is a major American multinational corporation that was founded in 1892. Products include electrical equipment, aircraft engines, and other manufacturing, with its headquarters located in Boston, Massachusetts. A minority of the company's annual sales are consumer products, and now a substantial portion of the sales are to the US Department of Defense. Also, GE's business groups include commercial and consumer finance, infrastructure, consumer industrial technologies, and healthcare, both diagnostic and imaging products. In terms of General Electric's international history, between World War I and World War II, General Electric expanded its global corporation in the electrical industry. In the 1920s, it was involved in the creation of the United Kingdom's national grid. The Global Growth and Operations Department is responsible for GE's business operations and marketing outside of America. GE's presence is in over 172 countries across the Middle East, Africa, Japan, Europe, Australia, Canada, Russia, South America, India, and China. And additionally, services include global research, finance, human resources, legal and business development, and public relations. Also, during the World Wars, GE helped to make planes and other defense technology. In this presentation, I will specifically discuss GE's presence in Ethiopia. A formulation of a business case based on the Global Compact and sustainability principles. On this slide, you will see the UN Global Compact principles, which focus on the areas of human rights, labor, the environment, and anti-corruption for the 10 principles. The United Nations Global Compact, or the UNGC, is both a policy platform and a practical framework for companies that are committed to sustainably and responsible business practices. The Global Compact includes 10 principles across the previously mentioned areas. General Electric became a signature to the UNGC in 2008. Business signatories to the UNGC are required to annually submit a communication on progress, or a COP, to the UNGC website and to share their COP widely with their stakeholders. Continuing on with the formulation of a business case based on the UNGC and sustainability principles, specifically for GE, these are some steps that they could take. First, use of intermediary practices to navigate local customs and practices. Next, implementing an operational requirements or human rights enterprise standard to identify and understand human rights risks across the company and set forth specific expectations regarding how to respond. The enterprise standard sets out minimum requirements that businesses must adhere to regarding risk assessment and identification, due diligence, and escalation and remediation of any concerns related to human rights. It also provides a practical guidance and best practices for business implementation. The execution of this can help businesses better mitigate human rights risks within their operations. Additionally, having agreements with unions to negotiate collective bargaining. In the EU, those are known as the European Works Councils, or EWCs, and in China, trade unions are known as All China Federation of Trade Unions. Support health and safety committees for workers throughout the supply chain. It can be important to have an efficient and smooth process where employees can report to leadership and management if they're aware of any hazards or standards that are not being followed. Additionally, reducing and eliminating the use of emission of toxic chemicals and hazardous materials by 2025. This means driving energy efficiency, minimizing waste generation, and for the waste that is generated, following procedures for reuse, recycling, and disposal, and an active commitment to use renewable energy. Conduct, program reviews, audits, and permit reviews of environmental policies. Employees and stakeholders should be incentivized towards compliance, and open reporting should be promoted. Lastly, creating and implementing a strong anti-corruption program based on integrity and transparency. So again, incentivizing compliance, open reporting, and building a company mission based on inclusion and diversity, and that values opportunities to promote anti-corruption. In the case of Ethiopia and General Electric, I wanted to provide and share a practical example of GE's international impact and business plan in Ethiopia. From this real-world example, we can see what the application of goals and policies look like that are designed to empower workers in the local region. Ethiopia was a founding signature nation of the UN and also one of the first independent countries in Africa. While there is a history of political unrest, Ethiopia has a growing economy, and agriculture, industry, and manufacturing account for a large part of this growth. GE itself has worked in Ethiopia for over 10 years and made huge investments in healthcare, aviation, power sectors, and capacity building. The partnership is an example of the Ethiopian government's efforts to create effective business environments for foreign investors. GE specifically partners with African governments and local company teams. In Ethiopia, specifically, the Growth and Transformation Plan, or the GTP, is providing technology solutions in partnership with state-owned enterprises and the private sector. The GC and sustainable principles that General Electric follows are applied in Ethiopia through strategic intervention, collaborative research, and building on the strengths and competencies of community members. Also, interdisciplinary perspectives and approaches are utilized to examine current social problems and promote the well-being of Ethiopians. In terms of the critical psychology framework, critical psychology emphasizes how a society's social structure has an impact on the well-being of people. It's aimed at a more inclusive psychology. Critical psychology also emphasizes the ways in which class and class barriers in society affect thinking, actions, and the mental health of individual. The goals of critical psychologists is to use the tools of their field to combat oppression, inequality, and to work towards a more free and more just world. Critical psychologists can engage in self-examination to challenge research assumptions. Most standardized psychological research is made up of samples from the West, which can skew generalizations about human behavior. And psychologists can also work to overcome their own biases and blind spots by building their multicultural competence. This requires exploring the psychological science of issues of race and identity and the impact of discrimination on the mental and physical health, particularly of communities of color. This previously outlined business and action plan harnesses the principles of the UNGC and critical psychology, since it's rooted in human rights and a just, fair practices in industry and business across the board for employees, partners, stakeholders, and the public. On this slide, I have attached the Global Compact Assessment on Human Rights for the General Electric Company based on the 2021 Human Rights Report and the company's COP. You will find attached here the human rights assessment that I conducted on GE. It covers specific areas of the company in terms of health and safety, hours, wages, and paid leave, human rights and fair treatment, community impacts, product stewardship, and then finally human rights and country risk. Overall, GE scored high marks and is reporting well based on the 2021 COP. In the areas where there was question, they were in the areas of wages and hours and leave. And just because I could not locate that information, but I made sure to notate that information needed to be followed up on in follow-up action. And notated that that information was not found or not known. But generally speaking, the company is scoring high in having a presence of worker safety, fair wages, and then low safety and community risk. In terms of implementing and institutionalizing the Global Compact, it's important to abide by the Global Compact because this can help a company establish and maintain universal and apolitical set of principles based on combating uneven distribution of resources and human rights. Additionally, adopting policies based on corporate and social responsibility, or CSR, can contribute to stronger local UNGC networks and participation and implementation. And an effective action plan is an ongoing process that includes measurable objectives and targets, which are tracked through such sustainability reports. But significant changes can be seen in networks when the activities and the incentives are focused on quality rather than quantity. One key example is the environmental sustainability goals outlined with the General Electric Company. As a company, a central goal is to reach net zero carbon emissions for its sold products by 2050. Most of GE's greenhouse gas emissions are across all reporting sectors and are by focusing on this key metric, the company aims to make a meaningful energy transition to effectively deliver a more environmentally sustainable technology and innovations. By 2030, additional ways to implement and institutionalize GC principles and sustainability goals include improving post-combustion carbon capture, space, and operating expense. Through 2030 and through 2050, GE also hopes to offshore and onshore improve wind growth and capacity factor improvement, also improve hydrogen or renewable natural gas blending, increase the flexibility to retrofit existing plants to reduce emissions and balance variable renewables, integrate battery storage with gas turbines, and then increase the transmission and distribution of hardware for existing factories as well in renewables, and then also build smaller molecular nuclear reactors. And finally, commit to 100% hydrogen gas turbine capabilities across their portfolio. Speaking on the critical psychology framework, there are strengths and limitations to the approach. In terms of strengths, there is advocacy for fundamentally different social structures focused on social justice and human well-being, thinking about and exploring alternatives, psychological interventions and perspectives with cultural competence and awareness is a strength of cultural psychology. And then additionally allowing for self-exploration of our own culture, values, and attitudes. Conversely, the limitations would be critical psychological critique might often be seen as too political or too ideological compared to mainstream psychology. Often, critical psychology pulls from political science, sociology, anthropology, and could be overwhelming to professionals already in the field with competing positions. Additionally, increased methodological and theoretical perspectives can contribute to competing concepts of what critical psychology is about or should be. Critical psychologists could be at odds with hierarchical systems they criticize. So there could be conflict between the political and the personal, and critical psychologists who challenge values, research, and politics of their institutions could find themselves at political risk. In terms of the human rights recommendation, it's important to establish and publish an accessible corporate policy statement for all stakeholders that outlines the human rights standards. Often accompanying this human rights policy statement or position is the company's policy scope and the steps it has taken to develop such a policy or position. This often includes a summary of the processes the company has taken to develop the policy, a cross-functional team if appointed, and any policy mapping exercises that were carried out in consultation with stakeholders. Additionally, seeking out and creating opportunities for feedback from local partners and stakeholders, raising awareness about human rights that can change as the situation evolves. And then lastly, an effective plan to track and implement findings from metric reports to ensure progress and challenges are being documented. This includes regular discussion with government, regulators, community partners, trade associations, as well as environmental, human rights, and welfare groups. Also, the establishment of a corporate social responsibility platform, realizing that it evolves as new issues and challenges arise, allowing values to be flexible to this change. The policy should stipulate that this policy is subject to review, and if proven inadequate through the company's monitoring system, those concerns will be addressed.